Okay, so today we have Rodger Tschanz joining us. Rodger has been a technician with the University of Guelph since 1989, and since 2001 he has managed the Trial Garden program, which has locations at the university as well as in Milton with the Landscape Ontario office, as well as the Royal Botanical Gardens. This year there was also container gardens at Vineland Research and Innovation Center. Rodger also works as a technician for the Ornamental Plant Breeding Program in Guelph, and he teaches ornamental plant uses and identification to undergraduate students at the university. So, Rodger, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. Really excited to talk about the Trial Garden program specifically. Maybe you could start. Tell us a little bit more about what the trials are all about and your experience over the last, going on 20 years.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Scott. This is a great opportunity to talk about the trials, especially this year with COVID limiting people actually being able to attend our open houses. But yeah, so the trial gardens, to summarize, it's a great way to evaluate plant material for breeders throughout the world, right? So I get plant material that has been initially bred in Japan or the United States or in Europe, and you can imagine the climate in Europe is different than Southern Ontario. Central California is different than Ontario, and Japan is different than Ontario. So we bring all this plant material to our trial sites and plant it out in different ways. We plant plants in the landscape, so the soil, the drainage issues, the pH of the soil, how heavy it is, clay versus sand, those all play a factor in how well those plants do. And then we also try planting them in containers. And containers are much more popular or continue to gain popularity as far as a way of presenting and growing annuals in the home garden. And so we need to trial plants in those as well. And of course, the growing conditions in a container is different than in the landscape. So we trial plants in different ways. And one of the reasons why we have the trials in 3 different sites now is because, in a way, it's like having a replicate where you try to maybe some catastrophic event happens at one trial site. You have the other trial sites to sort of prevent it from being a loss, a season loss of research or evaluation. But you also, the growing conditions are different slightly, and in Guelph, we're probably colder than Milton. This is just after Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving, I should say, when we're taping this, and the trials in Guelph have succumbed to frost, whereas the trials in Milton, the landscape trials in Milton, have been touched by frost, but are still growing. So it's nice to be able to see how plants survive in these different conditions. So we trial annuals, we trial perennials, and to a much lesser degree, we have some vegetables that sort of fit into the mix too, because a lot of these breeders cover ornamentals and vegetables, and homeowners will have on their patio, they may have some vegetables along with their flowers. So I like to call the vegetable trial that we do is vegetables for small urban spaces, because that's really we're not a full-blown trial, but we can see where there are some synergies for the vegetables. So, and then the perennials, again, perennials are very, very popular. A lot of people will garden with perennials instead of annuals because they like the fact you don't have to buy it every year. The landscape industry, I see a lot of interest in perennials as well. So we need to be trialing perennials. and a lot of the breeders too will breed both annuals and perennials. So it's just another way of working with these plant breeders and providing a full service trialing operation really for the industry and the public. Um,
Right.
so
That's
in
what I
addition,
wanted to ask. Yeah, I wanted to ask a little bit more about, who is it for? Is it for well, you tell me. Who is it for?
yeah.
The trials in
So so that's right. Like the people who benefit from the trials, in addition to doing some screening for the breeders, they know, the breeders will be able to use this trialing program to see if Southern Ontario is a great place to market a certain plant. Um, so if it does really well in California but does really poorly in Ontario, then they may say, hey, we're not going to waste any money or promoting that plant in Southern Ontario. So the breeders benefit that way. The landscape industry has a chance to see these plants growing out in a number of different ways. So, I know that people in the industry are going to be growing containers as well as planting annuals and perennials in the landscape. So to see how these plants actually, in addition to performance, also combine with other things. So I like to think of our landscape gardens at the Landscape Ontario office as being ideas gardens. And so you have landscapers, you have members of we also have visits from the parks departments of the municipalities to see how these plants actually combine. So what colors go together, what textures go together. We do provide some ideas and demonstrations on some of those combinations. So that group benefits. Um, the trial gardens are also a way of like marketing, I guess, um, giving the industry a year advance notice on, yeah, this is going to be coming next year. How does this, so the garden centers potentially could benefit from the trials and saying, yeah, those are great things. We need to have them on our benches for next year for the public. Um, Garden writers have the opportunity to come and tour the trials and see, again, come up with material for their articles and media events, and seeing what they've read about, or the material they get from the media releases they get from the breeders, for example. See if how those media releases compare to what actually happens in our trials. So they get to promote it. They're part of the promotion process, really, for the next year. Then, of course, the public, the end user, gets to see these things as well and develop, something for them to get excited about, looking for in the seed catalogs or on the garden center benches. So, it's a bit of a challenge. Sometimes when you're dealing with brand new plant material, it's not always going to be available the next year. It may take a while for it to get into the system. So I realize there's a bit of a frustration factor there for the end user. But if the demand is there and the supply is there of the propagation material, oftentimes those plants will be readily available the following season.
Right. So tell us about how the trials went this year. Obviously, a lot going on in the world. I don't know if it if it impacted what you need to do to make these trials a success every year. But tell us how was it, and of course, environmental conditions as well this year. Where I know it was quite hot and there was some drought periods. Tell us how it went across 2021, 2020.
2020, yes. The year of interesting times. Um, we, yeah, so I'll deal with COVID. Of course, that's the
Sure.
big one. We're still very much part of our life.
Mhm.
Um, we were fortunate enough to be part of, to get approvals to go ahead with our research. And so we had already started receiving plant material for our trials, the 2020 trials, when the shutdowns started occurring. So we were able to go ahead with continue with greenhouse production on the plant material. And then using safety protocols, we were allowed to go into the fields and plant these plants. And of course, that continued through to our open house. We, following safety protocols, we had a very kind of compressed open house season, which required people to sign up or register ahead of time before coming. So that said, with all those that extra layer of uncertainty and complexity as far as planning, I would say that the trial season went well in spite of all that. And yes, we had lots of heat. I think in the month of July, 17 days over 30 degrees, which is a lot of heat. And then of course the spotty rainfall. Some places in Ontario would get rain, and others were very dry. And so we could not have done the trialing program without irrigation, of course, but it really made for a difficult or challenging establishment time, because it was really hot and dry when we were planting the gardens. So some of these plants were really experienced a lot of stress early on. But by the end of the summer, I have to say I was really quite pleased with the majority of the plant material and how it performed.
So Roger, I want to circle back a little bit to how do you get the plants themselves? What's that process? You mentioned, I think, maybe some greenhouse time for these plants. I don't know if that's something you do at one of the sites, or if that's with a partner or partners. Tell us, how do plants come from the breeder to you? How does that selection process happen? And then logistically, how do you make that all work?
Yeah. So the plant material comes typically, let's talk about annuals to start off with. I either get seed, and that usually arrives January in that time frame, or I get cuttings or unrooted cuttings. I guess cuttings can come as unrooted cuttings or as rooted cuttings, and I get them both depending on the breeder. Um, so the cuttings would maybe arrive in March. Um, so back when I was growing, when Canada Blooms was part of my routine, for example, I would grow plants for Canada Blooms, and then as soon as the Canada Blooms material would ship out, I would start growing the plants for the trial season. So typically the cuttings and things would be arriving in March. We would, if they're unrooted, they take about 3 weeks in the propagation beds to develop roots. And then from the rooted stage, we would plant into pots. So 4.5-inch pots for some of the bigger plant material. And then if they're already rooted, we just plant, they come in a box already rooted. We stick them into the containers and grow them on. So I grow all the plant material for the trials. So it's all started at the University of Guelph. I have a helper planned up everything, and then we will split those plants, some to the Royal Botanical Gardens, some to the Landscape Ontario site, and some to the Guelph site. And so the plants are all starting at the same point, which is kind of nice. And then they're growing on, and then that diverges, or we diverge the planting environments after that. So once you get to the different trial sites, the water quality is slightly different, and then that's where the individual locations, the environment and those locations come into play.
So that's the beginning, and we talked a little bit about that middle period in terms of the season itself. what's the end process like? Do you do reporting to the breeders themselves? What is
Yeah.
how does that work?
Well, and I'm going to say right up front that can always be better, but I do what I we try to get the word out, and certainly I report to the breeders. I take lots of photographs because they speak volumes about how the plants are doing. So I will send photographs to the breeders so that they have a record. They can visually see what occurred with their plants during the summer. Um, I'll also give some comments about in my report about how the season went. If there was a problem for some reason, let's say an irrigation line broke down, for example, you report on that. Um, and then and then how, sometimes we come up with numerical ratings and how well those plants did, so that we try to, I'll look at a plant and assign it, a scale of 1 to 5. Maybe it was a 3, maybe it was a 4, and you do those repeatedly through the season. And then we communicate the results. Now, I try to communicate. There isn't a formal report I give out to the public, and maybe, and like I say, that's maybe something that with time I could do that. It's just a matter of having the time to do some of these things. But I do write articles for trade magazines. Um, you mentioned before in the introduction that maybe I'll give talks to the public, to um, Canada Blooms when we had that opportunity. Um, we would, I try to communicate some of the highlights of the trial gardens. And so when people come to visit the trial gardens, I had them voting on their favorites. So I like to communicate to the industry and the public what the favorite plants were from those visits. But I also have my own favorites that because I see the plants over the course of the season, I sort of develop a different relationship with those plants than the public coming on one day would.
Sure.
And so I may be able to communicate that as well. So
I'd love to ask you about that. That's actually a good segue in terms of this year. Were there any standouts, anything that sort of jumped out to you that you could tell us a little bit about?
yeah, sure. I guess it's hard to just limit it to a handful, but I'm going to try because of time. And we have, because we had so much heat, the downside to that would make it tough for establishment, but the upside of that is that we have the plants who love heat did very, very well. And I think what I would say that we had a great year for zinnias. Wherever I went in all the trials, the zinnias in our trial really stood out. And of course, they just love that heat. And one series, the Precosia Zinnias series, was quite amazing. Like a whole rainbow of colors, ranging from all the reds, shades of red, pinks, yellows, to white. It was really quite gorgeous. And this is just a short little, uh, well, about 30 centimeters, I guess, high zinnia, but with a very large head, and it really was dramatically colorful for the summer. And when you plant a large mass planting of zinnias and they all do well, it's quite dramatic. Um, another plant that it maybe is quite exceptional. I think it's unique. Is a new petunia from Ball. It's called Bee's Knees, and these breeders do have fun with their naming of
They
plants.
do. Yeah.
But and we could talk about that further. But with this Bee's Knees petunia, it's a very unique yellow, and I think that was one of the characteristics that really stood out. And when I noticed in the trials, as the temperatures got cooler, this summer and into September, that deepness of the yellow increased, and so I was quite impressed with that, because I think with breeding, and we can talk about some of the goals in breeding a little bit
Sure.
later, but
Sure.
um, coming up with new colors to extend the range of availability within a species is certainly one of the goals, and to come up with a really good true yellow is was quite amazing, and I really like that. And then to top it all off, this plant seems to be really drought tolerant and cold tolerant. And we like late in the season, sometimes petunias start to fade and they get diseased because of, we get a lot of moist conditions, heavy dews, and stuff like that. And I found this plant standing up very well to that. So I'm pretty excited about bee's knees, and I'm hoping that it will be available, um, or readily available to everyone next year if they want that color of petunia.
Sure.
Um, and would you like me to talk about some more plants, or
Would you mind? Yeah, if you wouldn't mind
yeah?
talking about, I love hearing about yeah, some of these new cultivars. It's very exciting.
Okay. Okay. I was just thinking about, sometimes you get unusual plants, and I think there's one that stands out is the salvia. It's called Lancelot, and it was just unusual because, first of all, it starts off with sort of a triangular shaped leaf that's covered in a green leaf covered in white hairs, makes it look gray. And so I'm guessing, I don't know for sure where it got its name from, but the Lancelot shields, I don't know if that's where it came from, but it's quite a, I guess if you had to compare the appearance of the leaf, it'd be similar to lamb's ears, woolly lamb's ears type of coloration. But it grows tall, and starts off with foliage, and then those flowers develop, and they're lavender colored full flowers on a spike. And by the end of the season, this plant sort of spreads and gets to heights of about 1 meter. So I've really found, I guess one of the things about it is it was really quite unique from anything else in the trial, and very fast growing and beautiful landscape plant, and it did well in the containers as well. And then again, getting back to a different type of plant with fun name, this one is called Brainiac, and it's a celosia, a coxcomb type of celosia, and it just playing on the fact that as that inflorescence gets bigger, it sort of looks like a brain, the surface of a brain. And this series, the Brainiac series, had 4 colors, which were really quite attractive: yellow and pink and red, and then a red with a dark foliage. And so these they didn't get very big. They only got to about less than a foot high, but they were really quite compact and attractive. I think they did better in a container than they would have in the landscape. Um, they just seemed to be a little bit more vigorous and happy looking in a container, but very attractive, and certainly capture the attention of the visitors to the garden. That was one of their favorite plants.
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, so those are some of the annuals. We had perennials as well, but that that really stood out. But I don't know if you want me to go on with that or not.
Yeah, no, tell us about a perennial or two. That would be great if you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess there is. We talk about the trial garden being part of the ecosystem, I guess, and I always like to think of that as when I'm not growing in isolation from the natural world. So we try to plant things that are maybe attractive to pollinators, and that's certainly very much a big part of our the sense of being nature friendly. And I think there's a lot of interest between planting things to feed monarch butterflies, which has been very much in the news over the last few years, as well as our native pollinators. So with that introduction, I just want to talk about some of those. There's an onion, for example, an ornamental onion that I grew this year that just got lots and lots of attention, and I think part of it was blooming as peak bloom right at the time of the open house, and I had it in the Guelph trial site. It didn't have enough plants to grow them elsewhere, so it was only in one location this year. But I will be moving it to Landscape Ontario. It was called Allium Serendipity, and it was just covered in bees at the time of our open house. And I think that was, and of course, it was gorgeous, a beautiful mauve colored flower that it was just just continuously blooming, and we it was found it very, very attractive. And so maybe I just end there with my talk
Sure.
about perennials. We have, I mean, other than to say that this year we planted over 150 different perennials at the Landscape Ontario site. And this is the first year of a very large perennial trial that very excited about. So this trial is going to go multi-years. And usually the first year for perennials, there's not a lot to see because those plants are getting established.
Mhm.
I expect we'll have lots and lots of favorites from the perennials next year as those plants fill in and start showing what they can offer. So I'm really looking forward to what they have, what to see, and what these things will do next year.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I look forward to it. We'll have to connect again, and
Yeah.
we'll see how things went this time next year. Yeah, I can't wait. Um, as a last thing, I want to move into a little bit about the breeding part of your interests, and talk a little bit about. You mentioned a few things, but what do you look for? What do breeders look for when they're breeding new cultivars? What are some of the things that how does that process work, and what are the breeders looking for when they're looking to create new plants?
Yeah. That's it's going to vary with the different plants, different species. Um, with petunias, for example, I think within a series, and maybe I'll just explain what I mean by
Yeah.
series. Like the breeders try to organize or market plants that have similar growing habits. So the wave petunia, which has just celebrated its 25th anniversary, has a certain growing habit. It'll grow very wide, more than a meter in the landscape, but stay very short in height. Tidal Wave, which is a sister series in the wave petunias, is grows very tall, and it can get up to over 18 inches high, and then over a meter wide. So if you're going to market a plant as a wave petunia, you're going to want to have a very low growing, wide spreading plant. Tidal Wave, you want it very tall and spreading. So that's what I mean by series. So so when you are filling out a series, you're a plant breeder, you have a seed catalog or a plant catalog, you're trying to offer as many different colors within that series so landscape designers can incorporate those different colors depending on the wants of the client, or the certainly certain colors are desirable over others. So what I'm saying there is that within a series, the breeders are trying to fill out all the colors, get as many colors as possible. So that is a goal. And like over the years, you know, recently, I guess back 6 years, 7 years, the black petunia came onto the market, right? Whether that's, there is a little niche market for a black petunia, but it was one of those goals that they were trying to come up with a new color that would expand the range available to petunia breeders. It wasn't truly black; it was a really dark, dark purple, but it's still it appears black to the casual observer.
Sure.
And then, of course, we've got a yellow, this improvement of the yellow coloration. So that's so filling in the color spectrum, I think, within a series, within a group of plants is always and always pushing it to the limit. Can we get this new color and looking for opportunities to introduce new colors? So that would be one thing. But coming up with plants that are resilient, like
Sure.
breeding tolerance to drought, to extreme rain, um, to frost, to a light frost. Can it handle a light frost? I I'm always that's always of interest to me, especially at the Guelph Trial Garden, where I if there's going to be a frost in the middle of September, I'm going to get it, and it's very disappointing because
Sure.
you may only have one night of frost, and then you have 4 weeks of gorgeous growing weather, and that one night ruined the rest of the fall for you as far as ornamental value. So to have something that can tolerate that, disease tolerance, of course, or so those are things that are there's always going to be something there, a new disease that's coming along that the plant breeders have to incorporate into their breeding, looking for resistance, incorporating those resistant traits. And most recently, I guess the biggest success story was with the impatiens, garden impatiens, and having two breeders come out with resistant garden impatiens, or resistant to the disease impatiens downy mildew, and
Right.
to have those plants coming out now, basically allowing it was when the disease happened, um, 7 8 years ago, again, when essentially shut down the impatiens industry, and that was a large industry in Ontario. And those were the plants that were really desirable for shady areas in our yards. And then to suddenly lose that, and try to replace it with other species that maybe didn't grow quite as fast, or were more expensive to propagate and grow. It that was that the fact that we do have an alternative now has been really quite desirable. So that was a success, and it seems to be re, um, effectively reclaiming the shade gardens for impatiens.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, Roger, why don't
Yeah.
we just take a minute to look ahead? What do you, I mean, how early do you know what's going to be happening for the for the next season? We're here in the fall of October of 2020. What do you expect for next year, if anything, at this point?
Well, normally I would have some expectations about for next year, and so in a normal no non-COVID-19 year, I would be going to trade shows. I'd be interacting with the breeders during this past summer. Um, I haven't had that opportunity this year,
Right.
and so it's going to take some time this fall, making some phone calls to find out what's new and what to expect for the coming season. So what I when I I'll normally start to get spreadsheets of from these breeders about will be shipping, probably the end of this, maybe in December, and then I start receiving it. So I have to say I really don't know what's coming yet. Um, I've had there's been some interest from the breeders again in saying, well, we'll be back, but I don't know with what yet. And I hope that we'll see an increase in the size of the container trial at Landscape Ontario. That was a great success this year. A lot of interest from those who visited. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to double in size this coming season. And so that's in a general way. And I hope we get more perennials introduced again this coming season to add to the perennial trial. And there seems to be some interest that way from in general terms. So that's
We'll
about
wait
all I
and
could say
see.
about.
Yeah,
I mean,
we
yeah,
will wait and
I
see.
mean, yeah. I mean, I can say that the trial garden in Guelph will be changing the locations for the very first time in 20 years. And that's a lot of work this fall, and it's exciting. We're hoping it'll be a better location than the past. Um, but we've had to move from our old site to a new site. And so that'll be, it could create some challenges, but also some opportunities as far as displaying and growing the plants in the Guelph trial site. So that's about looking forward. I'm thinking more of the layout of the gardens and as opposed to the plants that are going
Sure.
in there, which I don't know yet.
Sure. No, I understand. Well, I certainly wish you luck with the process of moving locations in Guelph. That sounds like a lot of work, but I'm sure you and team members will be able to do that well. And yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat about the trial gardens. I know I love watching them grow. I'm fortunate to work at Landscape Ontario, obviously, and get to see them up close and on a regular basis throughout the season. And it's one of my favorite parts of working at that site. And yeah, it's been really nice to chat with you. Of course, appreciate your help over the years with the new plants issue of Landscape Trades magazine as well. I think you touched on a few of the plants that are going to be in that issue of the magazine that's out this month. So that I hope people will go check out some of the more details there. And I know you have some videos that Landscape Ontario has filmed that will be coming out to chat even more in depth about some of the plants from this year, some of which you touched on today, and a few others that people can go to those videos that'll be on Landscape Ontario's YouTube channel to see even more. And I look forward to continuing to work with you to spread the information out to the landscape industry and to the public, because it's a lot of fun. I know people, there's always a lot of excitement around new plants and seeing what's coming. So it's a lot of fun. Thank you, Rodger.
It is.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Scott, for having me.
Great. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to the Landscape Ontario podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, we hope you'll subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to get new episodes every month. And if you have an idea for the show, please email me at scott@landscapeontario.com. Thanks for listening.